October 8th, 2016. The day I lit my first bonfire. Though I had no idea what I was in for, I pressed on, only to agonize over how Dark Souls punished me for my lack of skill. I took my time, coming back to the game gradually, picking up on my mistakes and conditioning myself to the tools at my disposal, celebrating each victory along the way, only to be crushed once again by something else. It was brutal, and I felt like I had to claw my way through the game, but through my experience, I recognized that Dark Souls was unlike anything that I had ever played or will ever play. Many of its elements are dispiriting, including its depiction of a depressingly solitary world on the verge of death, and its deliberately unabashed difficulty. It crafts a world that reflects the player's own despondent emotions when they are beaten into the ground. That said, just as many of its elements are meant to inspire hope and courage. After all, why do we keep playing this game if it is eliciting such negative emotions, especially ones that stem from our own inability to overcome its challenges? Why not just go do something else with our precious time on Earth? Because Dark Souls, in all of its cruelty, gives players control when faced with seemingly insurmountable tasks, something that we don't always have in life. Every bonfire lit is a sign that you're improving. Each enemy defeated is representative of your own ability to assess their patterns and react accordingly. The game gives you everything you need to do this adequately, especially thanks to the all-powerful dodge roll. The various characters you meet along your journey impart their own words of encouragement, often being eccentric in their own ways, though ultimately wishing for you to stay safe on your journey. For example, Laurentius, a man that sits near the Firelink Shrine, famously says to you,
"Be safe, friend. Don't you dare go hollow."
That last line is most significant, as hollowing doesn't mean death. You are undead after all. Going hollow refers to giving up. The Firelink Shrine is one of the most memorable locations in the game for many reasons. It is where you truly begin your pilgrimage through Lordran, and it is where you end up after ringing the second bell in the depths of Blighttown. It is a place of rest and recuperation, but also later a place of reflection, as you consider just how far you've come. With everything you've overcome so far, you can't give up now, or it will all have been for nothing. It is of course a lot to stomach. The trial and error process of ingraining each attack in your mind so that you can find moments to retaliate, and the pressure to perform well enough with this accrued knowledge on each and every attempt, weighs on you during each fight. I get unimaginably frustrated with myself, or the game, or a combination of the two. But I continue to struggle and endure and contend, because I know from experience that it is possible. All the while, this intense mixture of determination and anger builds within me. But I must keep it at bay, as emotion will only interfere with my ability to perform well. My heart races as that health bar inches closer and closer to zero, all the while I am struggling to stay alive myself. And soon enough, it all comes together. With that final blow, any and all emotion that has been building is finally released. I might even scream, and make sounds that I might not have known I could make, all elicited by a video game. But as I let all of that emotion flow through me, I quickly feel it be replaced with something else. Happiness. I let it overtake me, hands still shaking, and I feel my heart rate return to normal. I think to myself as I calm down, I can't believe I just did that. This is because I had spent a long time analyzing my opponent's movements. I knew them like the back of my hand at that point. I might be stunned, but the process was representative of what I am truly capable of. If I could defeat them, then surely I could handle whatever else comes my way. And now that I'd finally won, I could pursue the wondrous things that lie ahead. Then I reflect on something that every truly difficult encounter in a From Software game brings to mind. If a video game could bring about such intense emotions and instill a willingness to never give up through virtual pain and suffering, I think it might be pretty damn good. There have been countless stories about how Dark Souls pulled its players out of some of the darkest moments in their lives, allowing them to confront manifestations of the things in their lives that might be pressing down on them and overcome them, allowing them to see the other side and feel emotions that they might not have felt in a long time. all within one of the most brilliant settings ever crafted for a game. A world on death's door, yet one so breathtakingly beautiful. When you consider just how badly you want another go at a boss after being slaughtered countless times, I can't think of a more fitting world in which to relent. The funny thing is, as much as I respect the original Dark Souls, it wasn't the game that taught me everything I needed in order to overcome these challenges. In fact, it took me a long time to beat most of these games. Bloodborne, for example, took me years to finish, simply because I couldn't beat Father Gascoigne for a long time. In reality, the game that gave me the strength to persevere through all of these games was Sekiro. Sekiro taught me everything I know. Its focus on blocking and deflecting attacks means you have to confront each and every movement your enemy makes, forcing you to analyze your enemy calmly and precisely. This dance of clashing swords taught me to assess enemy patterns carefully, and proved to be exactly what I needed to overcome and appreciate the rest of Miyazaki's games. It's funny too, because this game is a tough one for Souls veterans. It essentially demands that they rewire their brains and completely discard their habits and game sense in favor of something new. Rolling out of the way of attacks at the right time for full immunity is no longer the best way to survive. Instead, you need to confidently demonstrate to your opponent that their attacks will never break through. Despite this, I find that I have a much easier time playing this game than any other game in the Soulsborne lineage, precisely because of its unique focus, which is a complete inversion of the popular opinion. Isshin the Sword Saint is generally considered to be one of the most difficult bosses in the history of these games, with the phrase "hesitation is defeat" being firmly ingrained in the minds of everyone that attempted to fight him. But now, I fight Isshin for fun, simply because I crave this game's combat. Hesitation is defeat is an apt way of summarizing the mindset you must adopt in order to make it through this game. You can't waver in your conviction, nor can you cower in fear, as both will lead to your opponent breaking your posture and slaughtering you. You must stand your ground. In this video, I wanted to recount my personal experience with conquering Sekiro, as well as delve into its brilliant design. How it hooked me more immediately than other games of its kind, how it builds you up, tears you down, and builds you back up again, and how I believe its combat fostered confidence in not just my own gameplay, but my art as well. I'm Liam Triforce, and this is a video about Sekiro. Like I said, my journey with Miyazaki's work began with Dark Souls, but more specifically it was the terrible PC port that was held together by duct tape and fan-made patches. I have a lot of nostalgia for my first experience with that game, but of course, I didn't finish it until much later, and the same goes for Bloodborne. I watched the Game Grumps playthroughs of Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 with the full intention of actually finishing them myself someday. Yeah, someday. Maybe. Throughout 2018, From Software revealed more information about their next game. Once teased with the phrase "Shadows Die Twice," the game came to be known as Sekiro, and I was instantly entranced by its Sengoku-era setting and gameplay concepts. I love Japanese historical dramas, particularly films that deconstruct the way of the samurai, like Harakiri, as well as ones that focus on why samurai pursue the paths they do. The best works of this genre usually shed light on the human condition. Visually, Sekiro also wears one of its inspirations on its sleeve. When the final scene in Sanjuro had that exaggerated geyser of blood erupting from Hanbei's chest, I doubt Kurosawa could have imagined how overutilized the technique would become across multiple mediums. To Sekiro's credit, however, the blood spray is used to give players a sense of gratification for landing a killing blow after breaking their opponent's posture, or stabbing them from stealth, and it never fails to satisfy. That's the thing though, Sekiro isn't about a samurai, it's about a shinobi. Unlike samurai who were born into nobility and followed Bushido, a strict moral code, during this time period, shinobi were often mercenaries born to poor families that would take any measure to ensure an objective was fulfilled. They performed assassinations and didn't carry much in the way of an ethical code. Also, most of what we know about shinobi these days comes from fiction and fantasy anyway. This did, however, ensure that the gameplay possibilities in Sekiro would be incredibly exciting. with its balance of stealth, movement, and sword combat, and it also presented the Sengoku period from an alternate perspective to that of a noble samurai warrior. The protagonist, often called Wolf, observes the siege of Ashina Castle and leads a solo violent assault on it as a third party, with his only objective being to rescue and protect his lord, a young boy named Kuro. As is the case with all of Miyazaki's works, Sekiro employs fantastical elements as well, despite the Ashina clan being a real clan in Japanese history. The plot revolves around finding a way to sever his and Kuro's immortality, and there are plenty of weird enemies you'll encounter that definitely take some historical liberties. Though, hey, who's to say that giant shit-flinging apes with swords didn't exist in the Sengoku period? When it comes to those gameplay possibilities, there's a lot that sets Sekiro apart from the Souls games and Bloodborne. Sekiro features an enticing amount of verticality and movement options in its level design, thanks to the Wolf's grappling hook. And not just a dedicated jump button for the first time in any of these games, but the ability to jump off of walls and other surfaces for extra height. You can also shimmy along ledges to maintain the element of surprise, or to just barely reach higher places. You can fling yourself across rooftops while exploring, escape from enemy sightlines, dodge attacks, and find secret paths, as well as use elevation to your advantage to perform stealth kills from above. Your movement possibilities also make exploring the game's world and interacting with its level design a ton of fun, as you can scale castles and mountains, go around cliffsides to find secret routes, and so much more. Another unique element to this game is Wolf's prosthetic arm, which you can fit with various tools, each with their own applications. If you want a shotgun blast of fire akin to Guts' arm cannon in Berserk, one that both staggers enemies and leaves them engulfed in flames, or perhaps a giant lance that you can use at long range, or a barrage of explosive firecrackers that stun enemies, you can find the parts for those tools and upgrade them to your heart's content with materials you collect across the game world. You'll also have a plethora of items to use to inflict status ailments on your enemies, buff yourself, and everything else that you'd come to expect from one of these games. Despite Sekiro not being an RPG, as it drops the character building, Souls-based progression, and class-oriented focus that Dark Souls utilized in favor of its own singular strong focus on sword combat, you are still offered a wide range of tools to personalize your experience, should you find them to make an encounter easier for you. If you find that a boss is staggering you too quickly, and you're not the best at deflecting it, you could use Gokon Sugar and Spirit Fall to mitigate this, or Akko Sugar and Spirit Fall to inflict more posture damage on the boss before it can even get through to you. You can also try using other items like Divine Confetti if the boss is an apparition, a pacifying agent to avoid terror buildup, you know the drill. You've even got a healing gourd as a replacement for the Estus Flask, which you can upgrade by finding gourd seeds all over the world. Exploration for all of these new items is made more fun thanks to Wolf's capabilities, and it proved to be the first aspect to truly hook me. The balance between stealth, your own abilities, items, and solid combat made each new area that brimmed with enemies a far more dynamic experience than anything I had experienced in a FromSoft game prior to Sekiro. Sekiro also introduces a mechanic that allows you to resurrect after death, provided that you have a charge for it. You can resurrect again after performing a death blow on an enemy, almost as though you are harvesting immortality from them, but if you use any additional charges after that, you will have to replenish that charge by defeating enemies. It gives you one last chance to finish off a boss's health bar, and I always tended to use it strategically. Sometimes I'd accept my death and start from my last sculptor's idol, but other times it feels great to get a second chance, and feel like you shouldn't take this new lease on life for granted. The wolf's immortality becomes a central theme in the game's narrative, and giving players the opportunity to utilize it is awesome, but it also comes with a price, aiming to convey the impact that this cursed power has on the world. Each time you return from death, your odds of the world being afflicted with dragon rot increases. Characters will actually get sick, meaning your use of this ability directly impacts other people in this world, and the more people that fall ill, the less likely it will be to receive unseen aid. Basically, Sekiro doesn't use souls that you can retrieve after dying, instead cutting your sen and current experience in half, unless you receive unseen aid, a palpable way of impacting the player for taking advantage of their own immortality. You can cleanse dragon rot if you have the resources to do so, and with that in mind, I tended to revive heavily on more difficult bosses. This also meant that I lost out on a lot of sen that I hadn't spent, but I appreciate its inclusion as a way of conveying the weight of immortality through a game mechanic, and in how it assisted me in the journey to improve at the combat of this game. Indeed, combat is the crux of this entire discussion, and the very thing that made me fall in love with the game, beyond everything I've just mentioned. When facing your opponent, you can jump and dodge out of the way of their attacks, but you do not have the invulnerability that you have with the dodge roll in Dark Souls. Well, you do, but not nearly to the same extent. Regular sword slashes also won't be enough to whittle a boss's health down, as they will deflect your attacks most of the time. The posture bar can be treated as a sort of inverse health bar. If a character's meter fills up and they try to block an attack, their posture will be broken, leaving them open to attack or a death blow. Health is still an important factor in battles, however, as the lower it gets, the easier it will be to stagger someone to begin with. This only scratches the surface of the tug-of-war that this system employs, though. While blocking an enemy's attacks without any sense of timing will impact their posture somewhat, if you time your L1 presses with an enemy's attacks, you will instead deflect those attacks, not only mitigating the damage to your posture, but also impacting the enemy's posture far more. The cherry on top of this system is that, if you are able to perfectly deflect an attack, when your posture meter is completely full, you will never stagger so long as you never miss a deflection. The sound design also assists in your ability to deflect and anticipate attacks, as a distinct sound will denote when your opponent is ready to retaliate. Oh, and the sound design is impeccable. The nature of this system took me on a journey unlike any game I've ever played, and directly informed my approach to every game in the Soulsborne pantheon. Starting out, however, I was awful. No one is going to be able to predict every enemy's attacks perfectly on their first attempt, even if they are telegraphed generously. The game eases you in quite well, though, as you begin clinging to stealth so that you can retrieve your blade from Lord Kuro, and you'll find that stealth is a necessity in thinning the herd before you can tackle more formidable opponents. The Chanbara trope of only one opponent attacking you at a time when you are swarmed, as seen in films and theater performances, is not at all present in Sekiro. No one fights honorably out here or waits their turn. It is a free-for-all, and your abilities as a shinobi will serve you well. Your first major introduction to the posture meter comes with the battle with leader Shigenori Yamauchi. His sword swings are quite simple, and his posture meter fills up faster than most other bosses in the game. I wonder how this guy felt about being tutorial fodder. Once you manage to escort Kuro to the secret route, you'll confront Genichiro Ashina. Genichiro soon becomes a symbol of the development of your own strength, and we'll discuss how he reflects that development each time we confront him. But for the time being, he is designed to utterly decimate you. With no knowledge of how to deal with his attacks and no prior experience, the game wants you to fail here. Interestingly enough, if you actually beat Genichiro at the beginning of the game, you'll get a slightly different cutscene where you'll be hit by a cheap shot with a shuriken. So no matter what, Wolf here is getting his arm chopped off, and Kuro is kidnapped by Genichiro. Wolf finds himself saved by the sculptor, and he discovers that this sculptor has crafted him a cool prosthetic arm. From here you learn where Kuro has been taken, and you can set out pretty much as soon as you like. Most of the early game in Sekiro follows the rhythm of your introduction, in which you balance stealth, combat, and movement to hop around Ashina outskirts. Since Ashina Castle rests high in the mountains, the entire area is covered in snow, which gives this area a deliberate and lonely atmosphere. It's autumn when this game takes place, so the snow that gathers as a result of the high elevation is combined with the crimson leaves to create a gorgeous contrast. I also find that the snow makes for a great backdrop when you perform an execution. That snow is getting covered in red either way. Eventually you'll run into General Naomori Kawarada, who is a completely optional mini-boss that you can skip if you'd like, but skipping bosses in this game is generally not advisable for a couple of reasons. For one thing, let's talk about this game's version of Zelda's heart pieces, prayer beads. 4 of them create a prayer necklace, which means more health, just like a heart container. The difference here is that while you can still find prayer beads by exploring the world, looking for secret paths and that sort of thing, the vast majority of them are earned by defeating bosses. Be it a major enemy, an obstacle that stands in between you and the rest of your adventure, or a mini-boss named General Tenzin Yamauchi. If you want more health, then you have to be able to defeat these bosses. This is significant, as it means that if you want to stay alive longer while making mistakes in boss fights, the game heavily encourages you to seek out and conquer other boss fights. You can technically level up in this game, but each level you gain is to be allocated to one of many abilities you can learn, which can give you an edge, particularly some of the other arts that you can learn later on, like Ichimonji, which is not only a technique that Lord Ishin once used, but it also recovers your posture upon a successful use. Everything is designed in service of your journey to mastery over the core combat of Sekiro, as in simply breaking your enemy's posture. There are no shortcuts to becoming invincible. In that regard, you should consider each boss a lesson and be thankful for what they teach you. These early fights with Ashina Samurai, for example, are designed to convey the basics of sword fighting to you. Something that becomes quite clear as you attempt to break your opponent's posture is just how quickly it will regenerate if you don't play aggressively. If you back off to recover your own posture by holding the guard button, or heal, you'll be giving your opponent an opportunity to undo all of your hard work. Then comes the Chained Ogre, which subverts your expectations of how a battle in Sekiro should function based on your experience with Naomori Kawarada, provided that you didn't skip that fight to begin with. On top of that, the Chained Ogre is a required fight. In order to proceed, you must defeat this boss. It both teaches you about unblockable attacks, in this case grabs, which you never want to be in the way of, and you might also notice the aforementioned detail of the posture bar not recovering as quickly when either you or your opponent are at low health, and this means you can retreat when the ogre decides to use its scarier attacks. Though the Chained Ogre does not use a blade, you can still deflect nearly all of its attacks with good timing. The fight pulls the rug out from under you by asking you to start jumping and dodging away from attacks, but this proves to be a necessary skill. If every boss was just a matter of observing and memorizing attacks and deflecting them, then you'd become invincible in no time. After defeating the Chained Ogre and going through the gate behind it, you'll encounter Tenzin Yamauchi. And this is where you will learn that attempting to fight a powerful foe when you are surrounded is a very bad idea. Of course, the idea of stealth killing all of these enemies once more if you die to Tenzin is daunting, which is why the boss is optional, but Tenzin also teaches you about the unblockable forward thrust attacks that enemies will do, sometimes even catching your dodges, depending on the length of their weapon. At this point, you should have enough to unlock the Mikiri counter, which is a necessary skill to learn, and this boss gives you an opportunity to try it out. The first major boss, the one that stands between you and Ashina Castle, is Gyobu Oniwa. He can seem intimidating due to the speed at which he darts across the battlefield, the range at which he can attack you with his spear, and the fact that he rides a horse, so its reactions are also a factor. But he swings his spear in a slow and predictable manner, and you can briefly make him stumble by using your grappling hook at a distance. Once you get past his size and speed, Gyobu shouldn't be a problem at all, provided that you've inherited the skills that the other enemies are meant to teach you. If all of this proves too difficult, then you can instead pursue an alternate route through the Hirata estate, if you happen upon Inosuke's mother in the Ashina Castle outskirts. If you offer the bell charm she gives you to the Buddha statue by the sculptor, you'll find yourself in the past, when Lord Kuro was first kidnapped. This area is entirely optional if you're not pursuing one of the alternate endings, but if you're imagining it to be a reprieve from the main game, you'd be completely wrong. The Hirata estate's level design is much more linear, flat, and narrow, which means stealth is much harder to accomplish, and there are multiple fights that will probably piss you off. I'm going to contradict myself here and say that Tenzin might not actually be the fight where you want to learn how to perform the Mikiri counter. It helps, but it's feasible to defeat the boss without it. Shinobi Hunter Enshin, on the other hand, uses thrust attacks so frequently that you are essentially required to master this technique. It is the best way to stagger him quickly. You can also get a cheap shot on one of his health bars from stealth, something that I took advantage of. And what is your reward for defeating this guy? Your dying father Owl hands you the key to the hidden temple, and soon enough you stumble into a fight with Juzo the Drunkard, who is even harder to kill. He coats his weapon in poison, and his attacks will severely impact your posture if you don't perfectly deflect his attacks with timed L1 presses. Oh, and despite how tough he is, enemies like him show up kind of often later in the game. This is the cycle of Sekiro and by extension the Souls games in a nutshell. You'll struggle against a boss for quite some time, and upon finally defeating it, you'll be able to move on to an even harder boss, only for the cycle to repeat itself once more. With that in mind, what propelled me forward? If it's not a sick, masochistic desire for punishment, what legitimate reason do I have to keep playing? Well, aside from the intense physical and emotional response that comes from finally prevailing over a difficult challenge, as I mentioned with Dark Souls, it's that in contrast to those games, I came to view Sekiro as a constant learning experience. Take Lady Butterfly for example. Her barrage of attacks at both close and long range play into the importance of perfectly timing your button presses with Juzo, as well as your understanding of Wolf's movement through the Chained Ogre fight. Every boss is designed to strengthen and test your own understanding of Wolf's abilities. Even if you don't recognize it, you are improving with every battle. I used to utterly despise the Blazing Bull fight, but just recently I learned to treat it as a lesson in both the importance of jumping rather than stepping out of the way during aggressive battles. And I began using the environment to my advantage, which you can also do in order to have the bull crash into the wall and stagger. In order to even stand a chance against some of the later fights, each of these bosses being treated as stepping stones is essential. And when I started to examine the game under this lens, I felt truly compelled to see this journey through. This is why I respect this game so much as a standalone work. Because it is an action-adventure game with a singular focus on its combat systems, every single boss can be designed around imparting wisdom onto the player regarding these systems, as well as testing them on what they've learned. If you approach this game with the mentality of feeling like an invincible warrior, you will be humbled quickly. Rather, you should see each battle as an opportunity to learn something new about yourself and what you can do in a confrontation, as well as understand why you are making mistakes. Are you rapidly pressing the L1 button hoping to get some easy blocking or deflecting in? Why not try waiting for the precise moment to guard when deflecting? It's scary as it leaves you wide open to attacks if you miss your opportunity, but learning to do this just might be your best shot at sharpening your skills. It's easy to get frustrated, I know, but despairing over the difficulty of the obstacle before you, or your own inability to perform adequately in a fight, will only serve to hamper your future attempts. Do not focus on just what's in front of you, be it a difficult fight in this game, or something you find yourself obsessing over in life, or you will miss out on the greater picture. See each hang-up as just another obstacle to overcome, and one that will transform you into someone better once you figure out how to overcome it, no matter how difficult it may seem. In overcoming each hurdle one at a time, you will come to see just how infinite you truly are. This game is all about becoming one with the wolf. Breathe, concentrate, and accept that you will fail, as it is essential to the learning process. You will get there in time. You can worry about being invincible later. For now, just climb that mountain in front of you and see what's waiting for you at the top. An incredible landscape of potential and many mountains that still have yet to be scaled. Being able to see all of this is why I never gave up on my journey. It all motivated me to see it through, and it accentuates the euphoria of actually prevailing, as not only does relief wash over you now that the battle is over, but your victory also means that you will be able to see everything else that this world has in store for you. Combine this feeling with my philosophy on each boss being a learning experience, as well as the inherent satisfaction that comes from this game's systems, and exploring its world for ways to become stronger, and you have what has become my favorite From Software game. Or at least my favorite From Software game that isn't Elden Ring, but even then it's close. Once you reach the top of Ashina Castle, making your way through the innards, exploring for items, and slaying anyone that comes your way, or otherwise darting between them, you'll finally have your rematch with the man who sliced off your arm and stole Kuro away. This proves to be one of the most important fights in the entire game. Compared to nearly every boss you'll have fought up to this point, this arena doesn't give you much room to breathe. Pair that with how aggressive he can be, what with his arrows, his swift pursuit, and follow-up attacks not often giving you chances to heal, and his rapid, seemingly haphazard sword slashes, and you have a boss crafted to be your first real wall, as it were. You might have been able to deflect the more generous telegraphs from before, but Genichiro has a combo that, if you don't deflect each and every swing, will stagger you and leave you open. You'll also need to have mastered Mikiri counters, as well as know when to dodge his other unblockable moves and grabs. And if all of that wasn't enough, Genichiro has a third health bar where he summons lightning from the sky to hit you with. It's intense. If you haven't fought most of the other bosses that force you to learn these lessons, Genichiro might just dissuade you from ever finishing Sekiro. That is, only if you don't allow yourself to fail and learn through failure. If you get caught up in the idea of racing to the finish line and moving on to another game, demanding instant gratification from this game's combat, rather than treating it as a slow and steady journey, then of course you're going to get stuck. Each major boss fight in this game is an event, and it's alright to spend as much time as you need. There's no shame in taking your time to make sure you're happy with what you've accomplished. Upon finally defeating each of these bosses, you won't believe how strong and how precise you've had to become, and you'll take what you've learned with you to the next fight. It's a process unlike anything I've encountered in any other game. Genichiro's difficulty is fitting. After all, he is a boss that is designed to kick your ass at the beginning of the game. And believe it or not, he uses a lot of the same moves as he does in that first fight. The fact that you can even stand a chance against him at all now is a testament to how much you've grown. It's not just the fact that you might have a bigger health bar or more gourd seeds. No, you're a much more formidable opponent now. You understand how to block and even deflect attacks. You know exactly what to watch out for now. All that's left to be done is to play just well enough so that you can take him down. To aid in your battle with Genichiro, there are a couple of bosses along the path through Ashina Castle that you can learn a few things from. General Matsumoto here is far more aggressive than some of the other generals, to the point where your own precision with deflections will be tested. Lady Butterfly in the Hirata estate also proves to convey similar lessons through her attack patterns and speed. But there's one fight in particular that I remember fondly for how it managed to impart some more wisdom through the shock of a swift defeat. The final room before Genichiro is where you will become acquainted with Ashina's elite Jinsuke Saze, and he will almost certainly humble you in a matter of seconds. The speed in his quick draw technique is brutal when you're not expecting it, and on top of that, his slashes will leave after images that will deal damage if you don't perfectly deflect them, essentially forcing you to perfectly time your L1 presses with his quick draw, and battle him all within a suffocating space, much like Genichiro. This is perhaps the most direct manner of teaching you the importance of both deflections and patiently observing your opponent. And you should take those lessons directly into the fight with Genichiro. All of this to say that the game gives you everything you need to crush this fight. Until you can deliver the final blow, just focus on applying everything you've learned. Don't worry about winning against him. Enjoy the experience of fighting him. Once I learned to adjust my mindset like this, Sekiro became a far more enjoyable game. And it's where I learned to appreciate everything that went into my victory against Genichiro, and the emotions that victory managed to evoke. Defeating Genichiro filled me with such excitement for the world that I still had yet to explore. Suddenly, everything had opened up to me, all because I had the focus and determination to apply everything I'd learned in that fight. Not only did I feel stronger, but I had been rewarded with a universe of possibilities when it came to exploration and combat. First of all, I had finally earned the ability to explore Senpo Temple and the Sunken Valley. Senpo Temple can be found through an underground passageway, and it rests in a lower portion of the mountain, giving you this gorgeous scenic view of the colors characteristic of autumn. The monks of this temple, however, crave immortality, just as Genichiro did, and he found a way to achieve it. Like a lot of Miyazaki's work, the pristine beauty of this area carries a thick atmosphere of impending death. This temple has been tainted by the monks' lust for eternal life. Not to mention, the level design here is so much fun to discover. There's a boss fight with an armored warrior who seems to be seeking vengeance for his son, and is almost certainly either English or Portuguese, seeing as this game took place toward the end of the Sengoku era, when Japan established foreign trade with Portugal and a few other European countries. Someone picked up on the fact that his son shares a name with the inventor of Robert's firecrackers, a shinobi prosthetic tool that I mentioned earlier, and knowing Miyazaki's penchant for cryptic but deliberately sophisticated world building, I doubt it's a coincidence. While we can only wonder why this man is here, What is true is that his fight is particularly memorable because it asks players to think outside of the box, kind of like the folding screen monkeys, in which you have to explore, employ stealth, and give chase in order to kill the slippery bastards, and the Divine Dragon, which we'll discuss later. His armor is impenetrable, so what else can you do? Well, the walls around you will collapse as you fight him, which made me weary at first, but I eventually realized that this hallway was designed like this for a reason, and I could use it to my advantage. And so, once I had a good angle on him, I performed another death blow and sent him plummeting to his death. The fight is memorable because of the warrior's distinct appearance and the method in which you defeat him, but also because of his purpose being conveyed through a single sentence, and hammered in as he falls to his death. You are only left to wonder about how he might have ended up here, but seeing as the Senpo Temple is bathed in the aforementioned lust for immortality, the conclusion I drew was that this was just a father who loved his son very much, and wanted to find some way to keep him alive. The other area you can explore at this point is the Sunken Valley, which takes you across a ton of tall platforms with gunners at the ready. The fight with Snake Eyes Shirafuji always gives me trouble. Much like Genichiro's arrows, deflecting them is fine in a pinch, but it only serves to harm your own posture meter, seeing as these are projectiles you're dealing with. I also used to find myself getting grabbed by that gun a lot. There's also the fight with the long-armed centipede giraffe. Colorful name, I know. This thing can also be found in the Senpo Temple, but it is required here in order to gain further passage through the Sunken Valley. More than even Genichiro, these two have a lengthy rapid-fire combo that serves as a checkup on your ability to deflect, almost rhythmically. The kicker is that this is all it tests. Aside from a sweeping unblockable attack and a couple of others, the boss essentially conveys that Sekiro can be a rhythm game if you are patient and observant when it comes to deflecting attacks. And I live for that shit. At the bottom of the Sunken Valley lies the Guardian Ape. I was stuck on this boss for a very, very long time. The reason for this is because the boss completely subverts everything you might have learned thus far. Sure, you can deflect its attacks somewhat reliably, but even with the strength and weight of its attacks, building up its posture bar, even with buffs like Akko's Sugar, is a losing battle. Guardian Ape goes back on nearly everything by forcing you to lower its health, to the point where if you inflict enough damage in rapid succession, the ape will cower and run away in fear. Not only that, but its size and speed made it incredibly difficult to deal with without the all-powerful dodge roll that you'd have if this were Dark Souls. Even when you think you're done, slicing the ape's head off and staring down that shinobi execution screen, you're not done. The ape stands once more only to pick up a sword and demand you deflect its slashes on top of everything else you're already doing. And it can inflict terror when it screams, which will kill you instantly when that bar fills up. So you can't stay in damage dealing range for too long. For all intents and purposes, this is a Souls boss in Sekiro, in the same way that Millennia is a Sekiro boss in a Souls game, what with her disgustingly fast slashes that are infamously difficult to deal with when you don't have the same defensive options you do in Sekiro, where Millennia would have been an excellent challenge worthy of the posture mechanic. In the fight with the Guardian Ape, you have to think about damage first and foremost, rather than utilizing the core defensive option that this game is centered around. Of course, this means that this boss could be viewed as a lesson in your other combat options, as you need to heavily lean on them in order to win. In my case, this meant Akko's Sugar, and the explosive fire prosthetic tool and other tools, but this also meant that I had to completely change the way I had been conditioned to play, and that is why this fight took me a long time to overcome. When I spend enough time on a problem, no matter if the end goal seems worthwhile, it becomes increasingly more difficult to maintain my composure. Annoyance will turn into anger, and anger will soon turn into complete burnout. I'll take a break and come back another time. I'll do something completely different. I'll look for help somewhere else. Usually time allows me to reflect on what I'm doing wrong, and I can come back refreshed. But with the Guardian Ape, it felt as though I was bashing my head against a brick wall over and over again. Even with my strategies of using items to my advantage, and even though I'd felt I'd memorized every attack the ape had at its disposal, any slip-up felt like too much. and my items would only carry me so far. It was the kind of obstacle that brought into question whether or not I'd made any progress at all. Eventually, I managed to make it all come together, and I pulled the centipede from its neck to finally end the battle once and for all. The truth was that I was still making progress. It's just that I had never been asked to do something like this before. I had to think about everything that I had at my disposal in order to deal damage here, and in doing so, I learned new ways in which to engage with enemies in the future. At this point, I had a firm grasp on Sekiro's core, the posture mechanic, but what I lacked was expertise in the other elements that can pay tremendous dividends. This fight forced me to consider those elements. Unlike Dark Souls, where defeating a boss always gave me the sense of disbelief over the fact that I had finally prevailed, overcoming the Guardian Ape, which went against so many of my combat instincts, instead made me think, hey, maybe I can do this. If I could kill this thing, then maybe I was doing just fine after all. At this point, I began to crave fights with strong enemies in this game, something that I'd always dread in other FromSoft games. But that's the beautiful thing about Sekiro. When I'm fighting a boss in this game, it demands so much of my attention that my mind is clear. All I am focusing on is how I'm going to deflect the next attack. It is such a pure form of escapism. And not only that, but as mentioned, it also manages to evoke such strong emotions upon both death and victory that it makes the experience of playing it, ironically, such a meditative and calming experience for me. From here, you'll be heading to Mibu Village. This will have you use your puppetry ninjutsu in a unique manner to raise a kite high enough in the air that you can reach the adjacent mountain with your grappling hook. It's a vague puzzle characteristic of other Miyazaki games, but the solution is so cool that I couldn't help but smile. This path will also allow you to kill the Great Serpent once and for all, showering the world around you in its blood. From here, there's quite a few bosses to tackle, and I savored each and every one of them. You'll fight the Lone Shadow Longswordsman once you return to the point in which you begin the game, and the lack of room to move, and the fact that he is constantly on the offensive, both remind me heavily of Genichiro and Lady Butterfly in the best ways. Sure, this fight can demonstrate Sekiro's unreliable camera at its absolute worst, but this fight is exactly what I crave out of Sekiro's posture system and setting. Two shinobi from different walks of life, using everything at their disposal in a battle to the death. And that's what this longswordsman wanted too. He was hoping for your arrival, and he has been sent to assassinate you. Win or lose, this battle is awesome. You'll also face apparitions like the Headless and the Shichimen Warrior, who will use projectiles and inflict status ailments that can kill you quickly. Stay on top of that and use Divine Confetti, and these fights should be over soon enough. There's one more fight right in front of the entrance to Mibu Village, and you can talk to a gunner just outside of the arena to learn more. The wolf will ask them who or what did this to them, upon which they will respond, "Large ape." Oh no. Oh god, no. No! I think my raw adrenaline is what carried me through this fight. They even have the audacity to summon an extra ape, and you have to deal with both of them simultaneously during the second phase. Thankfully, you only have to kill the main one for the fight to end, and you also get 2 prayer beats for finishing them off. Plus, I've already won against this ape before. I can do it again. Apparently this fight is optional, but I don't really care if a fight is optional or not. I'm gonna fight as many bosses as I can to increase my health and become stronger. Defeating this thing once again served as a testament to just how much I'd grown. Beyond this, you'll find yourself in a forest enshrouded in fog. Exploring it can be a game of memorization, and you'll need to find things to latch onto in order to fully solve it. You'll no doubt be lured by a flute to a specific house at one point, and it's up to you to figure out how to meet with the person playing it. Once you kill them, the fog will be lifted, also allowing you to enter Mibu Village proper. This whole area reveals itself to be a drab, dour, yet surprisingly active place, and spirits freely roam the place, one of which is a shamisen player that seems to be drawing this samurai into the village. If you continue to make your way through the village, you'll discover that the shamisen belongs to a woman named Orin, who plays while lamenting the loss of her lord. The fight with her forces you into a dance of swords, in which she is often invisible and invulnerable to damage, meaning you have to deflect as you always have, and personally, I found that compensating for her strengths with a divine confetti made this fight quite simple, yet still a nice subversion to keep you on your toes when deflecting. Upon laying her to rest, she'll give thanks to you for bringing that samurai to her in place of her lord, and you can return to him to receive a Jizo statue before he passes on. By the way, these things instantly replenish a resurrection gauge. But they are rare, so don't use them too often. I always found this fight memorable not just for its design, but its haunting implications of her luring that samurai to his death, like a siren luring a sailor in the ocean. I'm not much of a Miyazaki lore fiend, so I can't comment on her connections to anything else in Sekiro's world, but it's moments like this that make the various locations in Sekiro come to life. Ironic, seeing as most of these moments involve sickly, dying people or creatures, but that's Miyazaki for you. At the end of your journey through Mibu Village, you'll face the corrupted monk. We'll be seeing this monk again soon, although at the time, I didn't know that. While I found the fight to be difficult, what with how punishing it can be to mess up your deflections, it wouldn't be until later on in the Immortal Severance route that I'd come to truly, intimately understand the design of this boss. Either way, with the defeat of the corrupted monk, you'll find one of the key ingredients for the Immortal Severance ritual, along with a mysterious palanquin. You can't do anything with it just yet, but we'll wrap back around. Returning to the nearest sculptor's idol, you'll notice that you cannot return to the previous idols you communed with, due to the fact that your father, the great shinobi Owl, didn't actually die, and is here to stop his son from proceeding with the Severance ritual, which would eliminate the Divine Dragon bloodline. More on that later. It's here where you are given a choice to either remain loyal to Kuro, or betray him and continue to follow the Iron Code. Now, the latter choice leads to a completely unique scenario where you fight Emma and the owl kills Genichiro, while Wolf loses control of himself. It's an excellent route on its own, but on my first playthrough, I chose to remain loyal to Kuro, which meant I had to face the wolf's father. Much like a true shinobi, Owl uses everything at his disposal to make killing him a difficult task. A bomb that makes healing inaccessible for a limited time, shuriken, poison, smoke bombs that break your lock-on and light of sight on him, martial arts, and a massive blade that you have to deflect perfectly so that he doesn't have a chance to follow up. All in the same arena where you once fought Genichiro. Because of just how much he uses his other options, his posture won't break unless you either play aggressively or be extremely patient with the damage you inflict. But that can take a very long time, and you have to play very well in order for that to happen. Because of all this old bird can be one of the most difficult fights in the game. It can be, but if your learning process was anything like mine, your patience just might be the very thing that carries you through this fight. It took me a while to memorize his attack patterns, and I died plenty of times, more than twice. But I took those patterns to heart, and looked for openings where I could. For example, his aerial flip attack leaves him wide open to an Ichimonji, which means I can reset my posture and get some nice damage in. His anti-heal tool also leaves him somewhat open. Aside from finding openings though, I just deflected as best I could, taking what I'd learned from Genichiro with pattern observation, the centipede giraffe for rhythmically timing my deflections, and the guardian ape for finding openings. And I took my sweet time. One of the most important lessons I learned from fighting all of these bosses is that achieving your goal should never feel like a rush. Like I said earlier, there are no shortcuts to becoming invincible. This fight lasted quite a while because instead of being aggressive, I instead tried to focus on playing defensively. And I prevailed. I earned that victory by demonstrating that I knew how to read my opponent's movements, and that I had learned that patience is a virtue. Eventually, it was all over, and I had defeated the owl once and for all. Patience is your strongest asset in Sekiro. Patience is what allows you to remain calm and collected and think clearly. It allows you to give yourself time to fail and learn from your mistakes. It allows you time to assess your opponent and figure out how to retaliate. But most importantly, it gives you the strength to never give up. And through Sekiro's unequivocally solid game design, I had learned that patience is the foundation for true strength. Perfect timing for me to reflect on that too, because the next boss, which I am delivered to on the palanquin after rescuing Lord Kuro, sits at the entrance to the Fountainhead Palace, the true corrupted monk. Depending on the route you take, you might not even encounter this boss, but if you took the same route as me, this fight will be the only thing standing between you and the final area of the game. And to say this fight satiated my desire for a strong opponent would be understating it. The corrupted monk's swings feel like a song that you have to learn, and it swings its spear in these beautiful, robust, wide patterns that are so unbelievably satisfying to deflect, but equally as punishing to get hit with when you mess up. On top of that, simply blocking the swings won't be enough because the boss will still damage you, meaning that this is a boss that you have to deflect if you want to have a hope in hell of succeeding. On top of all of this, it has 3 health bars, it gains more unblockable attacks as the fight rages on, including one that can inflict instant death through terror buildup. It is a boss that demands near perfection consistently, but it also conditions you to that through its attacks, so this meant that I was consistently engaged and determined to win. Not a single minute was I bored or tired of it all. I went through the emotions that one would expect, but in spite of all of that, I was having the time of my life. The corrupted monk exemplified everything that I loved about Sekiro's combat when pushed to its absolute limit. When striving for perfection, it becomes a thing of sheer, artful beauty. All that was left for me to do was block everything else out and think only about my art. And I finally achieved my goal. The reward for delivering the final blow to this monk is being able to lay eyes upon the Fountainhead Palace in full, and all I can say is, this fight was totally worth it. The Fountainhead Palace is my favorite area in the entire game. From the word go, it is observably breathtaking, decorated in the sublime tranquil color of the cherry blossoms and surrounded by a running waterfall. You'd think that this would be absolute paradise, but it proves itself to be brimming with withered, decaying entities that prey on the liveliness of youth, quite literally draining it to prolong their lives. This dichotomy not only demonstrates the impact that the quest for immortality has had on such a divine palace, and why you should want to sever it in the first place for Lord Kuro's sake, but it also serves to set up the divine dragon's plight. Once you are able to lure the dragon out, it at first tries to protect its own immortality, slashing at you with the devastating force of a hurricane. This is also another fight that makes use of the lightning parry, which was optional to learn up until this point, but it is required in order to slay the dragon. Genichiro uses lightning in his final phase, but you aren't given enough time to properly play with it during that fight. I mean, most people are just trying to stay alive at that point. Another enemy in the Fountainhead Palace called Okami leader Shizu utilizes lightning, but you can kill them without learning the parry at all, just so you can explore the waters below in peace. Lightning is the only way to properly damage the divine dragon, though, so you'll become intimately familiar with how to perform this parry. It's as simple as jumping in the air, absorbing the lightning at the right time by pressing L1, and then discharging the lightning before you hit the ground by pressing R1. That last part is important because if you mess up the timing, you'll be cooked. It's a great thing that this boss conveys the lightning parry properly because the final boss makes use of lightning as well. And let's just say that you'll really want to know how to use it. The most beautiful thing about this fight, however, comes in the form of the final blow. The wolf is brought high above the dragon and reflects its lightning one last time before it stumbles, and he walks up its staff and stabs it in the eye with the mortal blade, severing its immortality, which proves to be a blessing. This poor dragon, once a majestic creature, is clearly being kept alive through the bastard rejuvenation of the Fountainhead Palace's residents devouring life from others. In truth, it wishes for death, and that happens to be a mercy that you can grant it. As the wolf delivers the killing blow, he wipes a single tear from the dragon's eye, a moment that struck me with bittersweet emotions. Though Miyazaki is famous for his cryptic storytelling methods in his work, he should also be commended for his ability to make players feel the weight of his stories through the environments you explore, and the actions that you are forced to take. The Fountainhead Palace is a masterclass in this kind of world building, very much a lesson in show don't tell storytelling philosophy, and one that I will never forget. With this, you have collected the ingredients necessary for the Immortal Severance ritual. Ashina Castle is under siege once more, and you'll find some of the toughest enemies you'll ever face throughout the entirety of this area. You can also fight the Demon of Hatred here, but, fuck this boss. Let's just agree to look the other way on this one, okay? Returning to the place where Genichiro once lopped off your arm, you'll discover that he has obtained a second mortal blade. All that's left for you to do is put him in his place. As mentioned, Genichiro serves as a symbol of just how far you've come. Aside from a couple of new tricks thanks to his new toy, he is the same Genichiro you once fought, and through fighting him, you'll realize how much better you are at the game. His combos are just another song you need to learn with your Instrument of Death, and you can deflect and Mikiri counter him like it was just another day at the dojo. Genichiro, however, is not your final test. Much earlier in the game, you might run into this fellow, who calls himself the Tengu of Ashina. In fact, he just happens to be the one who gives the wolf the nickname Sekiro. The name originates from the phrase Sekiwa no Ro, which literally translates to one-armed wolf. The Seki portion of the phrase specifically means individual or lone, in reference to a thing. It is an archaic term that used to be used for counting ships, which is in line with the game's Sengoku era setting, and it gives the name this double entendre of both one-armed wolf and lone wolf. Now that the Japanese lesson is out of the way, let's continue. The Tengu of Ashina sends Sekiro on a mission to kill the rats that plague Ashina Castle. In doing so, and then visiting Lord Ishin after you fight Genichiro, you just might learn that this Tengu happens to be Lord Ishin himself. You can converse with Ishin a couple of times throughout the game, offering him sake and learning more about his situation. Ishin is very old and sick, and it seems as though he just might be on your side when it comes to this corrupt pursuit of immortality and strength. He holds pure honorable values, and in the Shura route, if you decide to betray Kuro, he will fight you and disparage you for your actions. Toward the end of the Immortal Severance route, he succumbs to this mysterious illness. This is significant as upon defeating Genichiro here, he will slit his own throat with his mortal blade, and a young Ishin will crawl his way out of his body. This fight between you and Ishin is not born out of hatred, but out of Genichiro's pitiful, unscrupulous desire to see Ashina flourish once again, through immortality. You and Ishin fight simply because you must. There is a lot that can be said about the fight with Ishin. His attacks are fast and demand precision. Blocking is not enough, you must carefully observe him and deflect his every move if you don't want to be cut down. And a handful of his attacks will hurt you regardless if you don't perfectly time your deflections. If he manages to break through your defenses, those wounds will run deep. He switches between Mikiri and sweeps to keep you on your toes. He has long-range, unblockable attacks in each phase, gaining new ones as you go. With the addition of the spear to his arsenal, the fight suddenly harkens back to Gyobu and the Corrupted Monk, on top of the already fierce Ashina style. And in the final phase, you may not need to perform a lightning parry, but your ability to do so will make Ishin fall much faster, asking more of you just when your hands might be shaking and your heart might be racing. The pressure to succeed might have been mounting the further you make it into the fight, but it is at an all-time high at this moment. Ishin has earned his reputation as one of the hardest bosses in FromSoft's repertoire for a number of reasons. But in order to discuss how I defeated him, we should examine my journey from a different lens. While many consider Dark Souls an impactful way to personify and overcome some of the darkest times in their life, including myself, I consider Sekiro allegorical for my own artistic journey. My allusions to Vagabond throughout this video were intentional as I was reading this in tandem with my revisitation of the game. While the novel it is based on, Musashi, does touch upon similar philosophies to that of the manga, like selflessness, coming of age, and the notion of strength having a very different meaning with each opponent he slays, Vagabond takes a unique angle, with Musashi's journey toward true strength being an allegory for Takehiko Inoue's own artistic endeavors. Each boss I defeated in Sekiro represented a cornerstone in that journey, a turning point, a lesson I needed to learn, a language I had to speak, a song I'd been taught to play, all through that satisfying clash of swords. Much like Musashi, I learned something valuable about strength with each mountain I ascended, and from that summit, I could see the other peaks I still had yet to reach, but I couldn't wait to see what the experience of climbing those mountains would be like. Of course, I know that I'm comparing a story about a samurai to a story about a shinobi, but the elements of these two distinct classifications are not what I'm trying to compare. Instead, I wanted to directly compare Vagabond's philosophical focus on Musashi's pursuit of true strength to the experience of playing Sekiro for the first time and beyond, because I felt Vagabond accurately showcases and parallels my journey in many ways. First of all, the philosophy of taking lessons from each boss in this game was a direct parallel to Musashi's journey. With Inshun, he learned to fear death. With Kohei Tsujikaze, he witnesses a man finally surrendering himself to freedom from the spiral of death and killing, and reconsiders his position in his pursuit of strength. With every foe he faces, he becomes more thankful for the progress he's made. This comes to a head in the aftermath of his second duel with Denshichiro Yoshioka, in which he finds himself in a battle against 70 Yoshioka students. He feels grateful for the past year he's had to grow, and he thanks them in the middle of this gory battle where many samurai fall by his blade. This mindset of being thankful for the lessons you learn is not only an essential way of improving at Sekiro, but it also no doubt could be seen as allegorical for the right mindset to carry when surpassing those that inspire you most of all. You may feel more worthwhile because of what you've learned, but that's just it. You are worthwhile, and that's what should matter. Another theme of Vagabond that is widely applicable to both Sekiro and art itself is focus. Focusing on the task at hand is the only way you will be able to accomplish your goal. But how do we achieve that goal with everything else on our minds? How can we block everything else out and just focus? Well, I've found that if there is something that I am deeply passionate about, then that's exactly where I feel it is easiest to cast everything aside and focus. It's where my heart is, and where I find I am the most at peace. And those are the things that I hope to revolve my entire life around. For me, I find myself the most focused when I am creating something that I believe in. I use writing as a vehicle to drive through complicated feelings, and hopefully come out the other side with a new perspective. My art is a healing process for me, just as it is enjoyable for those that consume it. Musashi found himself contemplating this as well. His heart lay within his blade. During the battle with Seijiro Yoshioka, he states, "This place, the battleground, it's the only place where I belong. My anxieties are blocked out. I can focus and give everything I have. Everything." This paralleled not only my experience in creating the things that I am passionate about, but also in spending a long time, sometimes hours, on a single boss in Sekiro. Its mechanical foundation is so strong that I felt I could focus entirely on trying to achieve victory. Each death did not weigh heavily on me. It was just another step toward the end of the battle, because I was always learning something through that wonderful dance of clashing swords, just as I feel I am constantly improving when I continue to create things. This is where I feel the most calm. This is where I can focus. With that said, sometimes I can question my own progress. My struggles with the Guardian Ape seem to reflect this. When I spend enough time on a problem, no matter if the end goal seems worthwhile, it becomes increasingly more difficult to maintain my composure. It was the kind of obstacle that brought into question whether or not I'd made any progress at all. But remember how I said that patience was one of my strongest assets in defeating bosses? Well, patience is an important asset in life and art. Understanding that achieving anything takes time, is one of the best ways to finally do so. But also, be patient with yourself. Give yourself some credit even when you are struggling. Musashi himself faces a similar hurdle in Chapter 53, staring up at the stars after his defeat at the hands of Inshun and his desperate escape. He wonders, what the hell am I doing here? Am I making any progress at all? Or am I just falling apart? While valid, you cannot let yourself be consumed by these thoughts. Fear and doubt are poison when it comes to your art. Consider Ishin's words upon every death. Hesitation is defeat. These are guiding words to reflect on the seemingly insurmountable odds you face in Sekiro, as doubt will prevent you from doing the very thing you have fought so hard for. You've poured your blood, sweat, and tears into this. Why should you let anything else interfere? Later down the road, Musashi finds himself hung up on his victory over Seijiro Yoshioka, and he reflects on it. He visualizes Seijiro in his mind while staring into a lamp. Don't linger on this victory. One fight is over, that's all. You cut down a man, nothing more. This life of cutting down man after man, perfecting your skills, striving to listen to your own body's truth, that's the spiral of killing which is your day-to-day existence. Think only about your art. This is how I defeated Ishin.
Sekiro!
After defeating Ishin, I found myself compelled to check out the Gauntlets of Strength, and it's here where I realized just how far I'd come. Seeing as I have to defeat each of these bosses without dying in order to reach Inner Genichiro, Inner Ishin, and the like, I was baffled by my abilities here. Bosses I once struggled with were going down as if they were just a means to an end, and now I fight Ishin to kick back and relax. Seriously, I crave Sekiro's combat now. And to this day, I find I have a much easier time with it than any of the Souls games, Bloodborne, or Elden Ring, simply because of its strong focus and how I have adapted to that focus. That said, do I feel invincible? No, and I'm not sure if I'd ever want to. Perfectionism is a horrible thing that feeds on your own doubt over whether or not what you're doing is worthwhile. And this brings us back to the notion of what it means to be invincible. It's something that Sekiro aspires to make you feel throughout your own journey with the game, and it is a major theme in Musashi's journey in Vagabond. But the truth is just as Yagyu says in the manga. Invincible? It's merely a word. The truth is that you will never stop improving, and even if you did reach the top, there would be no one there to look up to. You would be alone. Instead, you should enjoy the constant process of improvement and be proud of all that you've accomplished. All I can say is that Sekiro helped me to be content with my own artistic process and not question my abilities in the slightest. Thank you, Sekiro, for reminding me through an arduous learning process that my life and my art have meaning. If you'd like to see another video regarding FromSoft's work, Rasputin, who has written a lot about FromSoft in the past, has a video where he provides his own ranking of each of their games in the Soulsborne lineage, comparing and contrasting their focuses, approaches to difficulty, world design, atmosphere, and more, all straight from the heart. Rasputin is one of the biggest fans of Dark Souls that I know. Also, a couple of months ago, I followed up my Chrono Trigger video with a 2-hour supercut of the interviews I conducted with Chrono Trigger fans, delving into all aspects of that game's design in an effort to understand it better. You can check both of these videos out exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is a creator-owned streaming platform that is home to a plethora of exclusive, ad-free videos like documentaries, video essays, narrative fiction, and much more. By signing up, you'll also be able to watch videos on Nebula first before they appear anywhere else. I myself have been uploading videos to Nebula at least a day before they go live on YouTube. You'll also be able to watch extended cuts, bonus videos, and original works that are all exclusive to Nebula in case you are hungry for more. If you subscribe, you'll also obtain some guest passes regularly, once per month for monthly subscribers, and 3 per quarter for annual and lifetime subscribers, so you can have friends or family members dive in as well. Nebula directly supports creators, and they've continued to play an important role in my ability to write about the things I love. If you'd like to take the plunge and show me and other creators like me your support, you can use my link, go.nebula.tv/LiamTriforce, to get 40% off an annual subscription. That's $36 a year, or just $3 a month. You can also purchase a lifetime subscription to Nebula that lasts as long as you do for $300. Thanks for your consideration. I've been Liam Triforce. Thanks for watching.